with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, before we start today's episode, I have a friend from Copenhagen Business School, and he's a former guest on Phronesis, Eric Guthey, and he is here to talk a little bit about a conference that they have coming up, and he has been instrumental in organizing it. Eric.
Scott, it is so great for you to have me on for this. I was literally sailing on the south coast of England with one of your upcoming guests, Jonathan Gosling, and we were listening to an episode of Phronesis and talking about how great the podcast is, and talking about the conference that we're going to be hosting at the Copenhagen Business School from December 10th to 12th of this year. It's the 21st International Study and Leadership Conference. We hosted way back in 2014. And as we talked, we realized that ISLC founders and participants number significantly among the guests who appeared on the Phronesis podcast. Keith Grint was one of your guests, and he helped found this conference. Dennis Tourish, who you had on, hosted the conference last year along with his colleague Zahira Jazer. Joanne Chula is a constant contributor to this conference. So are Suze Wilson, Brad Jackson, Steve Kempster, Susan Murphy, Mary Bean, who you had on, who did a fantastic podcast with you about complexity leadership in COVID. She is one of our keynote speakers this year and is also, by the way, just recently inaugurated as an honorary doctor at CBS. And then hopefully Scott, the infamous Scott Allen himself, will appear.
I think you sent me an image that had advice for 5 cents or something like that,
Practical wisdom for leaders, 5 cents a pop. We'll set up a booth for you at the conference.
Well, how can people learn more? This sounds awesome.
So the web page for the conference, we'll post it on your notes page, but it's www.conferencemanager.dk/ISLC 2023. Sorry, that's such a mouthful. But if you just Google ISLC 2023, you'll find it. Okay. And I should say that the theme of the conference this year is leadership and systems change, which fits well with a lot of the discussions you have on Phronesis, because I really see the way that in your conversations, you're raising the bar to bring leadership practitioners and leadership scholars to grapple with how perspectives on leadership can contribute to important issues like climate change, diversity, harassment, even how we've got the war in Ukraine. And what we're aiming for is both a large smattering of any research on leadership, but also some serious discussions about how we can bend the craft of leadership studies to address grand challenges and the task of addressing and improving even global systems.
Well, I think it's a noble endeavor, sir. And for listeners, yes, the link to the conference is in the show notes, so please check it out there. If you'd like to present, submissions are due July 31st, so you have some time if you'd like to submit and actually present at the conference.
For those of you who haven't been to Copenhagen before, it's a wonderful city in the summer. It's also a wonderful city in the winter, and we're going to put on the dog for people when they come. Copenhagen is known for its food, and it's the Danish word for how we get comfortable in Denmark is hygge. and it will be a very hygge conference, and we hope to see as many people as possible.
See, now that sounds like so the International Setting Leadership Conference sounds great, but the Hygge Conference sounds just cozy.
Very well pronounced, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much, Eric. Really, really appreciate your time today. And everybody, now here is today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Phronesis podcast. Thanks for checking in wherever you are in the world. Practical wisdom for leaders. And today we have a leader, and I'm going to introduce him to you at the end, I think. At the end, I'm going to say a few words about his story. The episode is really going to focus on him telling his story, and it's a story that should be known, and it's a story of leadership. And today I have Doug Keil. Doug is an Alaskan, and he is an individual that I met for the first time last summer. And we had some conversations, and I just began to better understand his story. And I thought, wow, this would be an incredible, incredible podcast episode. So, Doug, I am so thankful for your time today. Thank you so much for being with us. And I'm excited for listeners to hear your story. So, sir, is it, it's Alaska, it's March. What do you got? What do you got? Like 10 below right now, or is it in the 20s?
Thankfully today we have sun, and
Nice.
whenever there's sun, it means it's chilly. Today, I don't know, it's in the 20s.
Okay.
They got nice and said it would be maybe in the upper 30s by the end of the day. But, it's pretty much every 15 minutes you get something new. I was riding to Providence Hospital the other day. I have a wound I need bandaging twice a week. And so I was listening to the weatherman. He said it's clear and cold outside, and we'll have sun today. And as I'm looking at the sky, there's nothing but clouds. And I asked myself, these weathermen, basically, gee, why don't you just look out your window? But thankfully, for the last few days, it's the end of what we call the rendezvous up here. It's a week-long winter celebration. And thankfully, the weather stayed cold enough that the ice sculptures didn't melt like in the past. And the sun has made it enjoyable to be around. So this is the time of year that Alaskans generally tend to run off to Hawaii or other places for a week or two of warmth. But anybody that's lived up here long enough knows that it ain't over till it's over. I've seen snow on May 27th, so.
Well, sir, let's talk about your story. Let's talk about your story.
Okay.
You can start your story where you want to start your story, but
Well,
it's a fascinating story.
I'll start at where it all began, or where my life began. I was born outside the United States. My father took a 2-year stint to go to Beirut, Lebanon, and teach history, American history, and physics at American University in Beirut. My mother, it was pretty much right after their honeymoon. She had never been outside New York City, and then she ends up in Beirut, Lebanon. And in the second year, I came along, and they decided to not extend their working overseas and come home. And they came back to New York, where they were both born and lived and grew up. Then my uncle was up here in Alaska trying to build some homes and things. So I was brought to Alaska against my will at 9 months old.
I had no voice in the decision, right?
Well, whatever my voice was, I guess I wasn't pronouncing words at 9 months old. We end up here in Alaska, and my mother, the trooper she was, became a pioneer woman, and my dad walked to work each day with this huge bear skin coat that my uncle had during the service. We made it our home.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did. It's another country, for crying out loud,
Mhm.
So I grew up here. I learned to ski in my backyard at 3 years old and continued. We weren't very well off. So my skis came out of like a garbage can inside of Safeway where you got the strap on metal skis, no ski boots, and bamboo poles. And the more kids laughed at me, the more I got better.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to let people humiliate me because of not being able to afford the type of ski boots and skis that the other kids had. I got a paper route at 10 years old, started with 27 papers. And by the time I was 14, had 197 papers and was making darn near half, if not three-quarters of what my own father was making
Wow.
working for the federal government. So, I mean, I was doing well and bought myself a pair of skis and a pair of boots. They come into the story when I got hurt, and I'll trying to jump forward from 3 and 4 years old and et cetera to the time when I was 13 and 14.
Okay.
I was in Boy Scouts, and I had a friend here in Anchorage whose father became commissioner of education for the state. And our state capital is in Juneau, of which you can only get to by water or air. I saved up to go visit Dave on his birthday in August. I arrived Wednesday, the 27th, August 1968. And the next day, he and another Boy Scout took me on a hike up behind Juneau on a road called Basin Road, which terminates at the beginning of the Perseverance Trail and an old gold mine building area. There was a lot of buildings. In the main building, during the summer they would perform an old ragtime type or gold rush type, the story of Dan McGrew.
Mm-hmm.
So people were coming and going from that group of buildings. In the fall, they set up a no trespassing sign, but that's it. People would still be up there. There happened to be a small 30-foot electric tower next to a smaller generator type building right next to the large building where the public would go in. And my friend Dave, being a Boy Scout, had been up there numerous times and had noticed on one occasion there was a board hanging halfway up the tower. A board was hanging on the side with some old glass Pyrex insulators. And he said, Doug, I need a hand with these. And I asked him straight on, well, is it hot? Is there electricity? He said, Doug, I've been up and down this tower thousands of times. There's no power. There's no fence around it. There's no high voltage signs, et cetera, et cetera. I said, okay. And with a great deal of trepidation, I decided to go up the ladder with him. We got up on top of the shed. He advanced over to the side where the board was. Started to rain. I felt uncomfortable and told him I was going to get down. I didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Instead of going around the outside, I took a shortcut in between the tower, and my left leg came in contact with a 24,000 volt uninsulated wire that, when I got hit, felt like a 2x6 hit me in the back. And I had time to say goodbye, Dad, Paula, Melissa, Carrie, and Kathy. That was my family. I knew I was going to die. And I laid up there. My leg would swing, hit the wire, bounce back, hit the wire, bounce back. Now there's another scout with us at the time. Dave jumped off the tower and ran into town, which I don't know how many miles it was, but the police report said that I was electrocuted for approximately 15 minutes. But that was pretty much when they had arrived there. I had been being electrocuted on and off for about 32 minutes.
Wow.
The leg dropped off. My arm was burned quite bad. The worst part was it put a hole in my side from the hip to the middle of my stomach to the ribs to the middle of my back. It was just like the size of a football, or a shark had bitten out half of me. And I remember at one point holding in my own intestines while they were trying to get me down.
Mm.
They got me into the hospital, and thankfully, being electrocuted cauterizes the veins and stuff, so I didn't bleed to death.
Wow.
That was the good part. The bad part was I woke up in the emergency room and I looked down, and the first thing I said was, "Where is my other shoe?"
Mm.
I had spent all summer. I had bought my skis, my boots, and a pair of Jack Purcell tennis shoes, which at the time were like Air Jordans.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't have a leg, but I was more angry about losing my shoe.
Jeez.
But so I'd
Oh,
worked so hard for it, and
yeah.
it just, but that kind of shows you the disassociation you have when you're in shock.
Yeah.
But I was in terrible condition, absolutely terrible. I became very good friends with the doctor. Dr. Henry Akiyama had been known as one of the top doctors in Juneau. He and I later became very good friends. And he was very honest with me and told me that I probably wouldn't live to get to Seattle. And he was equally honest with my parents, saying basically, you're going to pick up a body. Where it comes back to the skis is in University of Washington Hospital, my dad was allowed to kind of take a step into the emergency room. And I said to him, "Dad, this is going to cost a lot of money, but I'll only sell one ski and one boot because I'm going to learn to ski on one leg."
Wow.
And that was to him a motivation of keeping me alive. I think,
Mm.
that it was, he could see that I was strong enough to say those things, even though I was pretty much on the ropes. I lifted my left arm to say, "Dad, don't worry about it." And that's when I noticed my arm had been burned really bad. And I said, "My goodness, what happened to my arm?" And then I passed out.
Mm.
So throughout the whole process of rehabilitation and them, the doctors in rehab wanting me to wear a leg, I had a very short amputation. And legs are very difficult to keep on and anything when you have a short amputation. And I realized that there was no way I was going to ski with an artificial leg.
Mm.
And they said it would be too dangerous for me with my side being as bad as it was, that if I took a bad fall, I could rip open. So my dreams of skiing went out the window. I was an avid baseball player, but I had a conversation with my dad that although I couldn't play, that I could coach. And then I coached a little league team for a while, but it just all became too much.
Mm.
And I never entertained the thought again about skiing. In 1975, I think it was, I graduated on time. I didn't miss any school. I had tutors in the hospital. There was a couple, a family in our church, and he was in the Air Force, and he had been transferred to Colorado.
Yeah.
And he heard of a place called Winter Park, which is a ski resort, but also happened to be the mecca for people with disabilities to come learn to ski.
Mm.
And most of them were out of Fitzsimmons Army Hospital and Vietnam vets.
Okay.
And it was the veterans of Vietnam that taught me to ski.
Wow.
Now, prior to that, there was a movie, and it's still out there somewhere. It could be on Netflix or whatever, but it's called Just a Little Inconvenience.
Okay.
It starred, the guy that was the $6 million man.
Lee Majors? Was that Lee
Yeah.
Majors? Okay.
Yeah, Lee Majors. He was a Vietnam vet, and he had a friend, and the friend was another actor by the name of James Stacy.
Okay.
James Stacy was riding a motorcycle in Las Vegas, got hit, lost his left arm and leg. So he played, I can't remember his character, but he played Lee Major's friend who got hurt in Vietnam.
Hmm.
And Stacy, as the movie is about Stacy being just traumatized by his loss of his arm and leg. He was drinking all the time, doing drugs and everything. And Lee Major's character wanted to help him. And he got him involved with other Vietnam vets and was skiing, got him skiing in the movie.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I saw one arm, one legged guy like myself, same side. And I said, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
Wow.
And it was fortuitous that this family got hold of my parents and told them about Winter Park pretty much at the same time. So I wasn't doing anything. The doctors told me that I probably wouldn't live to be 30
Okay.
with all the stress and everything in my heart. And so I had dropped out of college up here, and I kind of started to spiral down myself.
Yeah.
My parents came to me with a plane ticket and said, look, here's this place in Winter Park. Here's a ticket. There's some money to stay for a week down there. Go down there and see what's possible.
Wow.
And if it were not for the people that had moved to Colorado and let my parents know, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Hmm.
Most likely I would be dead.
Yeah.
So I owe a great deal of gratitude, not only to that family, but to my parents and my family here for supporting me in that thing. You know,
Yep.
we had gone through the 64 earthquake, so there's a lot of that trauma left over. And then 4 years later, I get electrocuted. So trauma compounding on trauma. And
Yep.
that not only affected me, but the family and everybody else. But long story short, I arrived at Winter Park coming from 92 feet elevation, going to 15,000 feet. I was white as a ghost. When I pulled into the parking lot, there were arms and legs, wheelchairs laying all over the place. And the finish line was right in front of me. And to my amazement, I see this guy skiing down the hill. He's in a push-up position. His name was Reen Kirby, and he had been born with spina bifida. He would mount his ski boots backwards, put his hands in, ski in the push-up position, trailing his legs, using them as a rudder in a way. And he did a handstand as he went underneath the finish line. And I was just blown away. I mean, I have never seen anything like this before. And there are a lot of amputees coming across the line, skiing the mountain, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I did not realize that I had walked into the week of the National Handicap Championship ski races at that time.
Okay.
And of course, they called it handicap back then because that's what they called us back then. You know,
Yep.
it's always each year you learn what you are from somebody else. And I walked up into the office of Hal O'Leary, who is the head instructor. And I said, hello, out of breath. My name's Keil. I'm here to learn to ski. I'll never forget it because he said, good God, sit down and rest. I don't mind you dying after you leave, but not in my office. Anyway, he took me downstairs. We got a skiing boot, And at the time, I was wearing my artificial arm, and he wired that to, we call them outriggers. They're a type of, actually, they're Canadian crutches. They're the kind that has a wrist thing. You put your wrist in and hold the handle. It doesn't come all the way up to the armpits like regular crutches do.
Okay.
So they're kind of like a fortified cane.
Okay.
And an outrigger is one of those with an angle on the bottom and a short ski tip. So it's much like an outrigger canoe.
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
It helps with the balance. Well, first of all, he took me over to an area where a lot of snow had been graded to a slant. And he said, we're going to walk up the slant and you're going to ski down it. And so I sidestepped up. He was saying, it's amazing the first time skier to even be able to sidestep up. And I said, well, I had skied before. And he said, even so, your whole balance looks real good. And I skied the bottom and he said, okay, now we go to the top.
Mm.
And that's where fear hit me, because our mountain here, Alyeska, back in the 70s,
Yeah.
was an extremely high intermediate mountain. And there was only like one chairlift at that time. And you got up to the top, you had to come back down.
Yes.
So he gets me up to the top. And that's how I saw skiing was in America. It was nice powdered snow. It had been groomed. There wasn't any ice. It was just beautiful. And I skied down the whole mountain.
Wow.
And he said, I've never seen anybody on their first time doing what you're doing, especially without stomach muscles. It was incredible. But I could not ski anymore that day. My leg had been completely burned out. But that set me on the course of coming home to Alaska and saying to a couple friends of mine, we need something like that up here. We weren't a state until, I don't know, what was it, 58, 59, whatever. And we were a new state. If you were in the service, you got combat duty because you were outside the continuous United States.
Mm.
And in many respects, it still is a country of its own.
There's definitely, as my family experienced, I mean, what is that plane ride from Anchorage to Seattle? It's 3 hours. I mean, that's a significant distance that you just don't think about necessarily. Or the fact, to your point, you can't drive to the capital. That's
the people of Alaska voted twice to move the capital to Anchorage, where the main populace is and the major airport is. And even though we voted for it, it's not been done.
Yeah.
There's Juneau's economic outlook would be dismal because all the state workers would be gone. When the legislature's in session, they go down in January. But I mean, people get gouged just for housing down there when the legislature's in session. It's kind of bizarre. But anyway, and back to skiing again.
When you did that first run, did anything spark in you? Like, oh, wow. What did that do for you? Was there any kind of moment, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, there really was. And I mentioned it in an article in 1980. It was the first time since my accident that I felt wind in my hair. Being able to move.
Yes.
And have wind, the feeling of exhilaration as you're skiing, you're enjoying the feeling. Your body is free. Your body is moving. There's motion. There's action. There's input, sensory input coming from everywhere. And the one thing I noticed was my hair. I had longer hair back then. My hair was blowing like I was on a bicycle or a motorcycle or something. But, the wind in my hair. And that was the magical thing. And feeling your body react other than sitting in a wheelchair or hopping. And, I mean, I'll get on to something else here in a minute, but So in 75, I came back and started talking.
Yeah.
Going to Lions clubs and things like that, talking about different things. And two people, Colleen Trout and a woman by the name of Shine Herfindahl, were ski instructors down at Mount Alyeska. And I was talking to them. And I said, we can do this. I don't want an administrative position. I don't want to be an executive director. I said, I don't have much time left in my life. I'd be more than happy to be the spokesperson, but I'm going to need help in the administrative side, at grant writing, all these other things. So we started out really in 1976, 75 and 76. And right at the same time, all the oil was being talked about. The money was going to start flowing. And, you'd think that a program such as this might be something worthwhile to invest in the state. But we got looked over and we eked our way through for a few years. 1977 came along. I was the only disabled skier up here at the time. So I went down to represent Alaska against teams from California and, all over, and these people were skiing every day.
Yeah.
A lot of the Vietnam vets lived in the ski areas and they're 100% disabilities. So, they had the money and the wherewithal and everything to be able to do it. But I needed an outrigger, and no one could build an outrigger up here in Alaska at that time. And a couple of the vets put me in the trunk of the car and drove me to put me in the trunk a block away.
The episode was taking a turn.
Yeah. Away from Fitzsimmons Hospital, and got snuck me in the back door into the prosthetic room.
Yeah.
And we talked him into making me this outrigger that had a socket for my arm stump and then a aluminum pole down to a small ski.
Yeah.
That I'd wear as an arm. So it was an extra appendage, which was completely dangerous because if I helicoptered it, I'd tear my shoulder out. And it was against the rules for me, not being a vet, to have a prosthetic made.
Oh, okay. Okay.
On the federal dime.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yep.
Which really wasn't that much. But we got out of there and we hit Loveland, Colorado ski area. And I got up and I skied all day.
Wow.
And on the kind of bunny beginner's hill, but it still was skiing.
Yeah.
And I was skiing with other amputees. And I kept saying to myself, this should be back home. I mean, people need this back home. They shouldn't have to spend money to fly to Colorado to do it, So we began to build a strategy. And in 77, I came in second in the very first race I ever did. That was extremely exciting as well for me and for my family. And once again, it kind of helped to have that little blurb in the paper, disabled Alaskan skier takes second place, so it kept it in the eye.
Yep.
1979, all this time, Challenge Alaska was called Alaska Handicap Sports and Recreation Association, which is a big mouthful.
Yep.
So in 79, I went down to race again and I blew out a gate. So I disqualified. So I was able to kind of sit around and ski for the rest of the week, but also watch the other skiers, pick up some tips and things like that. I returned home, trained during the summer. I was looking for a new job. I was 28, staring 2 years left of my life in the face, and I get a phone call. The phone call was from the president of the Disabled Ski Association saying, Doug, you're the only skier on one arm and one leg in the United States. there are others in Europe. And so we want you to come down and try out for the Olympic team, the Paralympic team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that just changed my life, because now instead of dying, I was going to try out for the Olympics. I made it to the team. And then I think it was in February or whatever, 1980, headed to Norway
Yes. Yes.
with the team. It was a very humbling experience, because you start to understand that not only are you representing Alaska, but you're representing the United States now.
Yes.
There wasn't a lot going on in 1980 in terms of world turmoil, but still, people would ask me, "You from America?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Alaska." And that would immediately turn off the political side
Yeah.
of things and focus on, do you live in an igloo? You know, do you get to work using a dog sled? You know, I mean, the normal things
Yes.
that do an Alaskan, which I found now. Prior to that, I had been to Europe and Egypt and stuff in 1977. And I found that if saying that, it would put a halt to the attitude, you're going to hear click, a halt to the attitude of anything political.
Yeah.
So it's race day.
Yeah.
Every member of the team had to be drug tested and seen by a panel of doctors whether or not they were going to be allowed to ski, because even in the Paralympics, this is the second Paralympic Games, the second Winter Paralympic Games ever held. And they'd look for doping.
Wow.
Or, some sort of substance. So everyone had to pass through that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So here comes race day. I get all dressed, all excited, get to the top of the giant slalom, and I'm sitting there, and it was freezing cold. The socket that my arm was in was just plastic and exposed to the weather. It was below zero, and I could tell my stump was starting to get frostbitten. But it came to my qualification, my group, and I'm sitting there, and my coach calls me up to get me ready, and I said, "Where's the other five?" He said they didn't qualify. They wouldn't let them race. And I said, "Well, I'm not racing against myself. That's unfair." He took me by the shoulders. He looked me in the eye, and he said, "Doug, we need as many medals as we can get to go back to the United States to prove that what we're doing is right, we're successful, and it's going to get bigger. And so we really need you to ski the best as you can, ski against yourself, your own time." And I did, and I finished, and I got a gold medal, which was great for me, my girlfriend that was with me. But for the rest of the team, they ostracized me. I wouldn't eat with them at the table. Mary and I would generally eat by ourselves or maybe with somebody else. But I could understand how they felt, because they weren't told what I was told. They just saw one guy ski by himself and get a gold medal. That weighed on me quite heavily during my time there. And then when it came up to the slalom race, I just did it again. I skied against myself. I best my time. I got a gold medal, but I was still kind of the black sheep.
Yeah.
Now, during the handing out of the medals for everyone in the games, there was a woman from Romania, I believe, that she skied against herself.
Yeah.
So it ended up that I wasn't the only one.
Yep.
But no matter what, I put that aside. And when I came off the airplane, I got first class treatment on the way home. First class seat on SAS. I was kind of like a celebrity to them, you know.
Yeah.
And in Norway and in Europe, disabled skiing had been going on for a very long time. It was the Swiss and Austrians and the Germans that ski every day downhill. You know, we're talking downhill now. World War II guys were skiing over in Europe long before America was.
Yeah.
There were a few, you know, in America, of course. My first exposure was our congressman, Howard Pollock, had lost his arm in World War II in the Navy, and he had a hook. And I would watch him skiing on the mountains when I was a kid. So I knew it wasn't unusual, but I never saw a one-legged skier. You know? Blind cross-country skiing had been going on for a long time.
Wow.
But the crowds in Europe were crowds. I mean, it was like the other Olympics. I mean, people over there appreciate not only people getting out and doing something like that, but also competing. And they rooted for those in their country.
Mm-hmm.
There was a one-armed Norwegian kid that 40 years later, I find out is related to my best friend that I worked with up here. His family was from Norway, and it was his mother's cousin. And he and I both skied in the same Olympics. And I went to Norway 6 years ago to see if I could track him down, but he was out of country. But that's when Challenge Alaska really started to have some sort of recognition, because not only did I ski in 77 and got second place, but this time I come home with 2 gold medals.
Yes.
And no one recognized much of it because that's the year that we beat the Russians in the hockey game in Lake Placid.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't get any underwear commercials, or I'm not even on a small box of Cheerios or
Wheaties.
Yeah. So
I'll send you a box of Wheaties with you on it.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's great to see where it is today, you know, and I'm really proud of the fact of having the opportunity, you know, and now to be in the museum in Colorado Springs. There's a new Olympic Paralympic museum in Colorado Springs, and I'm in there.
Yeah.
I'm just packing up my gold medals in my blazer to send to them now.
Really?
Yeah, I gave him my team sweater and my team hat, but I decided it's probably a good place for it to be. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if my family ever takes a trip down to Colorado, just see that. But other people have actually been there and sent me a note saying they were there.
Yeah.
But what we really wanted to do was take Alaska as year-round recreation.
Yes. Yes.
That's when we really decided that let's get the ski program solid, known to people in Anchorage, have a solid foundation underneath it. And Colleen and Shine, we would send them down to Colorado to the ski program, have them certified. And there's 3 levels of certification. So we got to a point where in Alaska, we had 3 certification 1 instructors in the state, which was an awful lot compared to many of the other states.
Yeah.
And once we got that settled, then we started to look at summer recreation, because summer is the most accessible in a sense. We didn't have bike trails and everything then, but there still was kayaking. We had a kayaking program, outdoor basketball, wheelchair races. There's always 5Ks going on. So we were able to do.
If I remember correctly, you were telling me about races from Anchorage to Denali, or
Fairbanks to Anchorage.
Fairbanks to Anchorage. I mean, that's an intense trek.
It's
not short distance.
No, it's insanity, actually. It was started by 3 guys in regular wheelchairs. Yeah. I mean, in today's wheelchair racing things, these are high tech, very high expensive stuff. You try pushing your butt from Fairbanks to Anchorage.
No.
Just getting out of Fairbanks, you're the first day they make it to where you got to get out at Fairbanks, and then you're rested for a full day because it's all uphill out of Fairbanks.
Wow.
It's just third. And it took them like 3 or 4 weeks to get to Anchorage,
Yeah.
kind of. But that was the impetus. That was the beginning of what became known as the Midnight Sun Marathon.
Mm.
And at the end, I can't remember how many years we did it. I would say 15 years. But by the end, there were participants. We had to actually limit participation. But the top wheelchair racers from all over the world came to do it.
Yeah.
There's a Navy SEAL that did it twice. And first time he did it, he said it was the toughest thing he ever had to do.
Wow.
Besides buds, getting to Hell Week and everything. He said this was Hell Week every day.
Mm.
And finally, towards the end, we altered the course, shortened it, put it on a different route, sending it to Seward, or just to Seward. But it was a very expensive thing to put on because you had 5 breaks, 5 legs, 5 night over. You had to have med teams following the group, massage teams following it. And it took all of Challenge Alaska's staff, of which wasn't very many people.
Yeah.
But other summer programs suffered for a few weeks. And it just got to be the point. We did have a wonderful sponsor for a number of years, but then the economy crashing and everything, it just went downhill. It's something that may be resurrected, but it's going to take a lot of time for that to happen.
Yeah. But the story of the lives that have been changed, the purpose that has kind of sparked in individuals because of this outlet, that's leadership. I mean, we need to make a difference. There's an opportunity here. We can, and I'm going to put some of the videos that are on YouTube about Challenge Alaska. I mean, they're incredible. And the difference it's made in families' lives and in these athletes' lives, I mean, it's incredible.
Many people look at these types of programs from an emotional standpoint. That's a nice touchy-feely type of thing. Where I approached it from the standpoint of economics. You have a family, one person in the family is disabled or becomes disabled. Let's say the family all skied together, and now that person is a paraplegic, and they're not skiing as a family, or an amputation or what have you. A family member feels left out. Other family members can harbor some sort of resentment or guilt that they go ski and their brother or sister can't. It was always the premise that if the disabled person had the opportunity to learn how to ski down at the mountain with the family there, skiing with them, or while they're learning, go ski the other mountain. But they're all there as a family and are able at the end of the day to either go to the cabin or wherever they're staying or go home, but have this positive wind in the hair moment.
Yeah.
That they see the joy, they see the spark that the person may not have had since their traumatic experience, and a look of hope. I know that healthy body, healthy mind, can kickstart somebody into an area of study that they hadn't thought about before, and they're excited about going back to school, even though they're disabled. They got some skin in the game.
Yep.
And what we saw happening down in the Alyeska area were more and more people purchasing small cabins or condos, and those small cabins and some of those condos became accessible And so you saw this whole chain reaction of families coming down with somebody with a disability,
Yep.
staying in a place that now is accessible, spending money at the restaurants, the whole economic bit kicked in.
Yep.
That was my main focus and argument against the touchy-feely thing.
Mm-hmm.
We got enough touchy-feely stuff. We have Special Olympics up here. Why don't you join Special Olympics? Because I am not developmentally disabled.
Yes.
And every amputee, paraplegic, whatever I would talk to said, I'm not getting on the Special O bus. Well, I'm not developmentally disabled.
Yep.
And a lot of, in today's world, look, I'm telling you, things are tribal. I mean, I'm a paraplegic. I don't ski with blind skiers. You know what I mean? Those are the comments that I would hear. But leadership, in my opinion, leadership today is needed now more than ever. And leadership, just in common sense, would be refreshing.
Oh, I was just going to say, several times on the podcast that, in conversations with folks, the pragmatism, how do we align and have dialogue and keep, what's the word I'm looking for? The country in mind.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. What's best for the country, and how do we come together and have dialogue and be pragmatic about, that work together and serve the American people in this case, right?
Yeah. I mean, and be civil,
Yes.
with each other, for crying out loud. I was reading a book. I did not know. I don't know if it was Socrates or Plato, but it was one of those guys that developed the word the middle class. I didn't know it was that old. He said, the only people that we can count on is the middle class of Greece, because they're the farmer, they're the person that pays taxes, there's the person that's stable and the family works together, this, that. You have the poor, you have the very rich, but it's the middle class who's paying the taxes for the wars that we are having in Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Victor David Hansen, in his book, Citizenship, The Dying Citizen, it's in the first chapter where he talks about where the word citizen comes from. I didn't realize the term middle class comes from there, but
Wow.
we digress. The thing about leadership is there are those that are natural leaders and stand up right away, but there are those hidden leaders that are quiet, introspective, objective, and sit back and listen and watch. And it's those quiet leaders that we need to tap into, because you always have somebody who will jump up and say, me, me, me. Are they the right me for this particular thing? You know what I mean?
Well, and are they the person who's saying we versus
Right.
me?
No, exactly. Exactly. Now, Doug used to have a number of what everyone would call a DWI, which was always the term for driving while intoxicated.
Yeah.
But in terms of me, it was Doug's wild ideas.
Let's do a race from Fairbanks to Anchorage.
I didn't have that thought. But, I came up with a sailing program. But the one thing that I mentioned to you in an email that I found fascinating and helped me a great deal to find, once again, wind in my hair. For some crazy reason, I bought a tandem bicycle, thinking my wife could ride up front and steer, and then I would ride in back and, participate and push.
Yeah.
Well, the bike I got was a Schwinn racing bike and was very heavy, and there was no way she was strong enough to take the front. So my best friend was in town, living here at the time, and he and I got quite good on this. But it took at least a week or so of communication.
Mm,
The guy up front is the one steering, setting the pace. The person in back is just a remora.
yeah.
They're on the bike and they're pedaling, but they don't have any say. Unfortunately, that's not teamwork.
Yes.
And Kurt had to learn from me when my leg was tired, I would say coast. So then we'd coast. Otherwise, he'd just keep going. Or when we come to a stop, he would lean to the left. Well, I don't have an arm and a leg. So when I leaned to the left, I fell off the bike.
That's not
So
good.
it was like, yeah. So it's like, okay, coast, stop, lean to the right. I would have to verbally do these commands. And then I started to say to myself, this would be a really good team building exercise
It would be.
for husbands and wives. And then the DWI kicked in. You need somebody who's going to sit in back and not tell you what to do, but trust the driver.
Mm,
And that was the blind. And we started the program with the Center for the Blind, where a blind person could actually go on a bike ride on the bike trails in Anchorage, get out, do something they haven't done before in a healthy way. And it was a smash hit. It just was so great. And our instructors had to be blindfolded as well and learn how to do it blindfolded. It became just a really popular thing. And then I started skiing and sailing. I started sailing the 34-foot boat. I learned on a 19-foot boat. And it saved my life, really, until I had an accident and I had to sell the boat. Kind of lost my head for a while. I wanted to tell you about a book I think it meant a lot to me.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Do that.
might have something in here that if I could read it, might be in terms of leadership or finding your purpose. It's written by a gentleman called David McNally.
Okay.
Can you see that?
I can see it. Yeah. Yeah. Even eagles need a push. I love it.
Right. Okay. There's one thing in here about the power of purpose. The power of purpose can certainly bring you fame and fortune. The real treasure, however, lies much more in how it enriches your life. The power of your purpose will help you access the only power that really matters.
Mm,
The confidence to move forward, to risk, to live the life you imagine for yourself with the security that no matter the obstacles along the way, you know that you can handle them. It is a power that emanates from the deepest part of you, and there is not a human being alive within whom this power does not exist.
love it.
That is page number 50.
Okay.
The other part, there exists within each of us a longing to leave a legacy,
Mm,
some proof that we were here. We need to know that our lives were important, that somehow being here mattered. We can attempt to stifle or ignore this desire, but we can't escape it. As humans, we are distinguished and defined by it. Ernest Becker stated, "What we fear is not so much extinction, but extinction with insignificance. It is an unwarranted fear, for as nature creates nothing superfluous, so it equips us with what we need to leave our legacy, the creative power of the human intelligence.
mm,
The primary purpose of this intelligence is to create something of value, to accomplish something worthwhile. The evidence of this is in the evolution of our species, where civilization stands today as the culmination of numerous creative acts by those who use their intelligence to improve the quality of human existence."
wow. Well, Doug, to close out today, I'm going to read something back to you. This was in Senator Dan Sullivan's Alaskan of the Week speech. And he ended by saying, "So, Doug, thank you for saving lives. Thank you for your inspiration to so many. Thank you for what you've done for Alaska, Challenge Alaska, for the state, for the Paralympian athletes we are going to watch and cheer in a couple weeks. And congratulations on being Alaskan of the Week." And you know what? Leadership, you have made a difference in so many people's lives. That's the definition of leadership. And for me, it was such a pleasure to meet you last summer and learn about your story. And so I say thank you.
I really appreciate the opportunity. To those out there listening to this podcast, I have a saying that I have on my card: visionaries act, everyone else just daydreams.
I love it.
So just do something.
Yeah.
And Scott, I really appreciate you offering me this opportunity. And as I said to you, and as we were talking outside at my dad's place, you do an incredible thing. And someday when I'm able to travel without having to find a doctor to bandage things up, I'd love to be able to come to an event or to where you are and spend more time.
Yes. It's a deal. It's a deal. In many ways, I just wanted to kind of end it there and let the episode speak for itself, because it's just a very, very powerful story. And, there's a quote, and this is a quote from one of the early editions of Kouzes and Posner's Leadership Challenge. And the quote went like this: "Leaders go first." And here's an individual who saw an opportunity and has made a difference. And I was honored to have the opportunity to have a conversation and learn more about his journey and the difference that he has made in the lives of many, the difference that he has made in his home state of Alaska and in the world. And I am so thankful for that opportunity. Leaders go first. And just an honor, an absolute honor. For each one of us, what is that difference that we are trying to make, large or small, in the world, in our community, in our family? And I think it's an opportunity for each one of us to reflect on that question. How can we make a difference? Take care, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.